Welcome back once again, fellow pick collectors and would-be pick collectors. Hopefully I could do a good job at explaining these sufficiently so if you're thinking about collecting, you could actually become interested in it by being aware of the many details that surround them. Our focus today is going to be on guitar picks primarily from the period of the mid-60s to the mid-70s. Some exceptions extending into the 80s and back into the 50s, and I'll note that if I can remember. We're going to look at 166 picks on 3 boards, 28 different DeAndrea shapes, 8 additional shapes for a total of 37 different shapes, and about 2 dozen or so different tortoise patterns. Now, my focus for this video was to be solely on the tortoise patterns of that period of time from the mid-60s to the mid-70s, 1975. However, I realized in putting this video together how many different shapes were involved in that over that period of time. So we're going to be looking at shapes and tortoise patterns during this period. I'd suggest that you go back and you reference the earlier videos on early tortoise patterns, and you'll see how those early tortoise patterns were even more diverse in terms of variation and shape variation as well. They're even more striking and diverse. But we do want to get an idea of the nuances here. Some of the tortoise patterns are obviously more different than others, but then again, others don't seem so obviously different because they're not. They're more nuanced, such as this pick here and this pick here. We're just looking at primarily 3 different shapes today. The standard shape, triangles in different sizes, and what we call rounded triangles over here. I've shown the shape number for each of them. For the 346 here, the rounded triangle, when it has a hole in it, DeAndrea relabeled that catalog number 350. And for the different sizes of triangles we see, I'm giving you the DeAndrea shape numbers and picks produced by DeAndrea with their shape numbers 355 through 357, and 2 over here that were never DeAndrea shapes. They could have been experiments, and they could have been made by some other company as well. So I want to point out a few exceptions to the general rule today of 65 to 75 period of time. And that's this top row of 4 picks right here, this pick right here. These occur earlier than 65, going back to the mid-50s up to about 65. And you'll see with these that they have a greater diversity of tortoise variation than the other ones we're looking at right here from the mid-60s to the mid-70s. So go ahead and acclimate your eye to that tortoise style that occurred during that period of time. Now, a lot of my collector friends hear me talk about the 1930s and 1960s a lot, and that's simply because that's when the greatest number of picks were made and sold. So a lot of times when I sell picks, you'll see me selling them from those eras as well. Obviously, picks were made during the 40s, 50s, and other periods of time, but not in greatest numbers, so you won't come across them as frequently as you would picks from the 30s and the 1960s. So we have all different variations, at least a dozen different variations in the 351 right here. Then we have these shades of variations on the 355, not as diverse as the 351. 355 and a half, though, we could compare that to that and see that it's obviously different. Same with that one. And sometimes I collect many variations of the same pick, as you could see with the 355 and the 351, because I do want to see all the different variations. Other collectors were happy just with a couple of picks from that period of time, and that's fine just as well. Whatever you choose to do with your collection is your business. We're going to move on to board number 2 right now. Board number 2, still predominantly DeAndrea picks, as we could see here. I got the catalog numbers showing there for you. We've got these big fat picks, a lot of surface area on the 360. The widest of them all, the 347. The longest of them all, the 366. So there were still some interesting shapes being made in the 1960s. And really difficult to come by the 367. Look at all these permutations of tortoise we have here on what's called the 358.5. And I'm going to bring over the 358 so we could see the distinction between a 358 and a 358.5. There you have it. You can see it's a little longer and a little wider, and this is exceedingly more difficult to come across a 358. Let's take a look at some of the variations here. Again, we have a couple from the 50s to the mid-60s, such as this one here, perhaps these patterns here. And but over here, we have something interesting going on. Here's a few on this end that don't even seem to belong to the 358.5 group, even though the shape is similar, a little bit smaller, minor shape difference, but you could easily be fooled that they are 358.5, when in fact these shapes go back to the 1920s and 30s. Now those shapes still continued to be produced, probably being marketed as 358.5s, but originally they arose as the number 10 in the 1920s DeAndrea catalog. Moving over here, we have some interesting stuff going on. Got the DeAndrea mandolin picks. Those were still selling in the 60s. These is the mandolin shape, 369, 363. And moving up here is what I call Muddy Waters tortoise style. Unknown who produced those. This is not a typical DeAndrea shape. They could have produced them, but that's still not clear, making them actually a rare and difficult pick to come by, but also a mystery. We have some of the earliest Dunlap shapes. Don't even have a logo on them, going back to the 1960s. And again, we have this interesting shape here, which we also see as the same shape as here. Very close to the DeAndrea 368.5, and in fact even could be a later variation of their 368.5, but again unknown. This group, we see the Pierce broken heart shape, clearly Italian celluloid from the mid-1960s. So John may have had these produced well before he even come out with his patent for the broken heart shape, as we see there, and I believe that patent was about 1980. So this is an unknown group right here, but very interesting, some very interesting shapes and variations. Really cool unknown group here. No idea who made these, but this suggests 1970s, 1980s celluloid. This one here, 1960s, 70s. And this, I believe, probably goes back to the 1930s or 40s. Very close to DeAndrea 362 shape. It's the only pick I've ever come across quite like that. We're going to move on to board number 3 right now. Thanks for hanging in there with me while I bring up board number 3. There's a lot of stuff going on here too. I'm going to start working from the left here. Some of our picks on the right are cut off, but that's okay. We're going to get to them anyway. And up here on the far left, we have the trapezoid shape known as the DeAndrea 361. 348 was still popular in the 1960s. Some cells of it in the 70s, but they really waned. 352, I believe, was discontinued for a while, brought back in the late 80s, and now is marketed by DeAndrea. But the ones from that period of time and onward are obviously, and usually have the DeAndrea logo or some other logo, and they're clearly not vintage picks. Here's the two John Pierce shapes down here. The one I mentioned earlier, the Broken Heart. In this pick, you could also see that in Will Hoover's book, Picks, that was put out in 1995. I've seen this pick before with a logo, and it says Straw Pick Gigmaster. DeAndrea did not use this type of celluloid. Similar celluloids, but not quite with those big chunks in there, you see. These big, if it's not obvious, let me bring it up. You see some really big dark chunks in there. And DeAndre had a style with smaller chunks, but not quite like that. Some real nice shapes here that we don't see often, the 353. And this could be a variant of the 353. I have a question mark on that, though. Still up for discussion and observation. Here's the 354 shape that's still made today. But as your eye acclimates to what vintage tortoise looks like, you're going to easily be able to make the distinction between a modern one and one that is not. 363.5, another obscure shape. Same with the 368. Here's this number 59, first produced in the 1920s by DeAndrea, but these were made, in fact, from in the 1960s. Here's the 348, another obscure shape, 347.5, and the 347 3/4. Now, you're going to see some size difference in between the 3/4 and a half right here. And it could be that the 368.5 is also so similar to 347.5. This may, in fact, be a 368.5. But I'm going to have to really take a look at the nuance. And it could be that DeAndrea had used the same punch for both picks during one period of time. Here's a 352.5, often confused with a 347 3/4. But as you can see, the 3/4 is slightly larger, rounder tip, smaller pick with a little pointier pick here. And one of our most interesting shapes is the Gene Schilling shape DeAndrea made, catalog number 365. And I only have one 349 from this period of time to show you. However, I do have quite a few in other videos from other periods of time, earlier periods of time from the 30s and 40s. DeAndrea catalog number from the 1920s, removed from that catalog. That's why the catalog number is not known, but they did continue to produce it. And there's a 358 that I mentioned to you earlier. So what I'll do is just grab a diversity of tortoise styles right now, and we'll take a look at them down at the bottom here and just compare them. As you can see, there are some really neat tortoise patterns that do occur during this period, but you do want to take a look out for them and be mindful of that you're going to run into a wide range of tortoise styles. There's some more too. Bring them up, give you a close-up shot. May have missed the pics on the right earlier. Give you a shot of those. I'm glad you joined me for this video. See my earlier videos. So much to learn about vintage pics. Any questions, give me a call. Leave my phone number and my email. Joe Macy, Play More Pics on eBay. And email findpics7@yahoo.com. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.